Black metal is known for its extreme and comically evil aesthetic. The bands famous within the genre all employ corpse paint, leather, spikes, chains, and medieval weaponry, a style occasionally broken up by an all-black wizard robe. But those only familiar with the personas of these musicians might be shocked to see what some of the genre's most famous album covers look like. A far cry from the gruesome and aggressive covers found within other genres of extreme music, black metal's covers are just unsettling, serene but with a tangible darkness beneath this tranquility. All of these covers were actually created by the same person, a Norwegian painter who lived a full century before the black metal scene as we know it even existed. So how did the work of a long-dead painter become the face of black metal, used time and time again, completely removed from its original context? This is the story of Theodor Kittelsen, the man who changed the black metal scene post-mortem. Theodor Severin Kittelsen was born on the 27th of April 1857 in Kragerø, Norway. His father, Johannes Kittelsen, died in 1868, leaving young Theodor and his 7 siblings without any financial support. In order to help provide for his mother and siblings, Theodor became a watchmaker's apprentice at only 11 years old. He briefly moved to Oslo in 1870 to study art. However, his funds soon ran out, and he had to go back to his watchmaking apprenticeship in his hometown. But by 1874, his talents were discovered by the businessman and art historian Didrik Maria Aall, who offered to help fund his studies. He spent the following few years studying in prestigious academies all across Europe, from Oslo to Munich and Paris. But prolonged stays in cities negatively impacted his creative process, and he felt a longing for the wilderness he grew up in. He wrote that he'll stagnate and not be able to execute on any of his ideas without being surrounded by the mysterious, romantic, and magnificent aspects of Norway's scenery. He returned to his hometown in Kragerø in 1887, but found himself still not able to work, the rural town not being isolated enough to facilitate his creative process. He moved again shortly after, to a remote lighthouse on the far north island of Skomvar. He finally managed to find inspiration there, resulting in him creating most of his well-known pieces while living in the lighthouse. His work is largely based in history, folklore, and nature. He was frequently hired to illustrate collections of fairy tales, sharing a particular fascination with trolls. Trolls began to dominate Kittelsen's work, outnumbering any other creature, and his series of illustrations of trolls is incredibly popular in Norway today. Over time, he stopped illustrating the books of others and started releasing his own, containing original drawings accompanied by his poetry. In 1896, he released his most famous work, Svartedauden or Black Death. The Black Plague claimed the lives of 3/4 of Norway's population, making it a particularly dark period of the country's history. Kittelsen depicts it as Besta, a skeletal crone carrying a rake and a brush. Wherever she used the rake, some people would be spared. Wherever the brush was used, however, everyone living there was swept away. She traveled the country by shifting into bird form, going from settlement to settlement and either using a brush or a rake on his populace. Kittelsen initially planned to use a character from Norse mythology to embody the plague. His mind was changed after he encountered a local woman that inspired Pesta's appearance. In his writing, he describes her as small, lean, and bent, her face greenish-yellow with black spots. Her eyes were squinting, dark and restless and set deep in her skull. Now and again, a strange, evil light shone in them, and they flickered round in every direction, so that it was impossible to fix her gaze. Her head bobbed up and down, her mouth moved rapidly, sharp and bitter. She was worse than the plague itself, I thought to myself, hence her name. Kittelsen continued to publish his fairy tales, poetry and illustrations, becoming respected enough to be knighted in 1908. By 1910 though, his health started failing. He was forced to move to Yeloya to get the care he needed, but eventually passed away in 1914. By the time the black metal scene formed in the late 80s, Theodor Kittelsen was an extremely respected artist in Norway, having museums dedicated entirely to his work. However, he wasn't particularly well known internationally. This would all change once his work became permanently attached to this niche genre of extreme metal. The first black metal group to use Kittelsen's imagery in their work was actually Darkthrone, while they were still known under the name of Black Death. In 1987, they released a demo titled Trashcore. Its cover featured a hand-drawn rendition of Pesta, fitting given the band's name at the time. An interesting example of Kittelsen's work finding its way into early black metal comes from the band Toke. While his paintings aren't present in any of the band's early work while they were still known as Tool, its frontman Huest's stage persona was clearly based on Pesta. His alias translates to cough, and in an age where all black metal bands held axes, knives and swords in their promotional photos, Huest chose to instead use a rake. But these examples were few and far between. Kittelsen's unsettling paintings of nature did not fit comfortably into black metal's image of the most evil genre imaginable, many seeing the paintings as detracting from the dangerous personas the bands favored. It's not easy to pair romantic art with men wearing leather, spikes and chains. This would all change with the release of Burzum's Visliset Taros. The album was revolutionary in a lot of ways, one of them being the use of Kittelsen's Svartedauden drawings on both the front cover, back cover and the inner sleeve of the release. The success of the album quickly prompted countless other black metal bands to start using Kittelsen's work for their own records, favoring the Svartedauden collection used by Burzum. Helheim used his paintings for their demo tapes. The same is the case with Toke, Morgul and Covenant. In 95, both Wungraven and Carpathian Forest used the exact same piece on their front covers. 95 also saw bands taking inspiration from Kittelsen without using his work directly. The year saw the forming of Solefall, meaning sunset in Norwegian. Their name was inspired by a piece of the same name, part of a two-painting series depicting the cycle of being through a sunset and a sunrise. The band saw this as fitting for the music they wanted to make, crediting Kittelsen for inspiring the name and concept of the band, but opting to use a different painting for their debut album, The Linear Scaffold. The use of Kittelsen's work in black metal was cemented even further in '96, with the release of the monumental Philosophem by again Burzum. From here on out, the painter's work became permanently associated with black metal. We can see numerous examples of his art being used within the genre, both in Norway and internationally, and often using the exact same pieces. She's making her way through the country. The drawing used for the back cover of Visliset Taros was also used for Vargtimen Part 2 by Weird and Entombed in the Depths of Frozen Forests by Ethir Anduin. Sorrow was especially popular, used for Eternal Winter by Eternal Fire, Passions of Wintry Dusk by Dampir, Ancestral Anthems by Protocult, A Goat Funeral DSV Split, and Verstugenheit by Jutta Gita. On top of that, Kittelsen's other paintings were used by countless bands, some of the many examples being on screen now. With the unbelievable number of black metal releases featuring the work of the long-dead painter, one has to ask themselves, why? What is it about Kittelsen's art that made it feel so at home within a genre of music he never could have imagined? Well, a huge part of the use of his works in the 21st century comes from bands following a trend set in the 90s. There must have been something about Kittelsen's work that resonated with the early black metal scene in order for them to choose to repeatedly use his paintings as album covers. Well, even though they are separated by a century, Theodor Kittelsen shared a surprising amount of similarities with the early black metal scene, especially the type of black metal pioneered by Varg Vikernes of Burzum. The goal of this branch of black metal has always been to transcend the detestable aspects of modern life, to escape our slavery to technology and to man-made governments, to go back to a time when man was more in touch with nature. It is entirely rooted in a romanticized version of the past, combining real history and almost forgotten mythology. While what modern life looked like was drastically different, all of the above can also be said for Theodor Kittelsen. He shared a deep fascination with nature and folklore in both his art and his writing. As mentioned previously, his revulsion with post-industrial revolution modernity was so strong that he couldn't even work unless he was surrounded by nature. Furthermore, both parties present this longing in a macabre way, fascinated with the peace one can find in the wilderness, just as much as they are with the death and darkness that exists below it. Kittelsen's depictions of serene nature with dark undercurrents pairs perfectly with the atmospheric black metal that spawned from the likes of Burzum, presenting darkness not as outwardly aggressive but as something heavy and incomprehensible. And last but not least, Theodor Kittelsen was Norwegian. The early black metal scene was overwhelmingly nationalist, the clearest example of their patriotism being the rivalry between the Swedish and Norwegian black metal scenes, with Euronymous famously calling the music his Swedish counterparts were making life metal. And of the black metal pioneers, Varg Vikernes was arguably the most nationalist one, with his views being extreme enough that even his peers have referred to him as a Nazi in interviews. Kittelsen's work pairs with Burzum's music perfectly, but there are a lot of romantic painters that would have worked just as well. I don't think it is a coincidence that Varg specifically chose to use a Norwegian artist, especially since the painter's work is present even in some of Burzum's most recent work from the 2020s. Theodor Kittelsen's paintings continue to be used within black metal even today. When his work isn't being used directly, it is often there as an inspiration, with album covers created to evoke the same feelings Kittelsen's work did on the early Burzum records. The genre has given him an afterlife he wouldn't have been able to conceive of, the work of a man who lived before sound recording was widespread, being used within extreme metal. Even though he likely wouldn't have been a fan of the actual music, I like to think that he would be proud of the ideas his fellow countrymen stood for, transporting the themes he was obsessed with into an entirely new medium. By now, the albums featuring Kittelsen's work have become a lot more famous than the paintings in their original incarnation. And with black metal becoming more mainstream, countless more people are being exposed to his work every day. A century after his untimely death, he has become the face of black metal to many, immortalized forever through some of the best albums the genre has to offer.